We're now joined by Liberal strategist Andrew Perez to unpack the election with 3 weeks to go until Canadians head to the polls. Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Now, there was a recent surfacing of news that Mark Carney's dad was a principal at a residential school. What should we make of this news?
Look, I think the story has been reported on. The comments made by Mr. Carney's father 60 years ago when he was a principal at an Indian day school were obviously absolutely unacceptable. Mark Carney has said as much. And I think we need to move forward. These views again that were expressed 6 decades ago were clearly representative of the assimilationist views that many educators and indeed political leaders held at that time. And the residential school history is a very dark history in this country, and one that Canadians have learned a great deal more about in recent years. And so I think at the end of the day, Mr. Carney was clear that these comments of his father from 6 decades ago were unacceptable. He doesn't share these views, and he and his government are committed to Indigenous reconciliation.
Now, some have argued that Carney's father's history with residential schools could complicate his efforts in promoting reconciliation with Indigenous communities. Now, as you just mentioned, he has made an effort to be an ally, but when comments like that are made, it's hard to differentiate yourself from being associated with that. So, how do you respond to that criticism?
I don't think it's at all fair, Theresa, for anybody to judge a political leader's values or views based on what a parent or a relative said or wrote 60 years ago. I just don't think that anybody would see that as being reasonable. Mr. Carney, in his very short tenure as Prime Minister, has made it clear that he is committed to Indigenous reconciliation and to continue executing on the hundreds of recommendations that were made in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, by the way, that was tabled a decade ago in 2015. And I think it's pretty broadly recognized that the former government, Liberal government under Justin Trudeau, was the most progressive government and action-oriented government in Canadian history as it relates to supporting Indigenous people. I note that 80% of the recommendations made in that Truth and Reconciliation Commission report from a decade ago, 80% of them have either been met or are on their way to being met. And we know that the Liberal government over the past decade has spent, billions of dollars on Indigenous people. The annual budget earmarked for Indigenous people was $11 billion a year in 2015. It's now $32 billion a year. Those monies are flowing to infrastructure projects, housing. The government spent billions of dollars on Indigenous people throughout the COVID-19 pandemic to ensure that they had the financial supports that they needed, but also to ensure that Indigenous communities were vaccinated in a timely manner. And so I think this government's record over the past decade on advancing reconciliation has been a strong one. There is still a lot more work to be done. More than 100 Boyle advisory alerts have been removed under the Liberal government over the past decade. And I know that Mr. Carney, this is an issue that's deeply personal to him and that he's committed to. So I think we need to move forward and to judge Mr. Carney on what he has said in his short time as Prime Minister, and also judge the Liberal Party on what has been not a perfect record, but a very strong record as it relates to Indigenous people since 2015.
Now, you mentioned moving forward. The Indigenous community is holding a lot of weight in the outcome of this election. How important is it for Carney's campaign that he resolves this situation? Now, I know he came out and he spoke about it, but does more need to be done? Does he need to continue to have conversations with the Indigenous community to make it clear that he stands with that community, and comments that were made in the past that are absolutely inexcusable, he doesn't stand with?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mr. Carney, there's 3 weeks left in this election campaign, and certainly Indigenous Canadians are a critical population in this country, and outreach to those communities is important. I think Mr. Carney will continue to get that message across, to speak to his values. As he said to media, he does not agree with his late father on this issue. Again, these are comments that were made 60 years ago. Sadly, comments like these were common and very much in keeping with the assimilationist values that many people held at that time. But I think ultimately Indigenous Canadians will be judging Mr. Carney on his commitments today, his record, and what he wants to do to continue moving the needle towards reconciliation. A lot of work's been done, but there's still a lot more work to be done. And I genuinely believe that Mr. Carney and the Liberal Party are committed to getting that work done, working collaboratively with Indigenous people across Canada.
Now, I want to move over to Canada's trade war with the United States. So, following Donald Trump's tariff announcement, Mark Carney responded with retaliatory tariffs. U.S. officials urged countries to not retaliate. How should voters assess the potential risk of escalating a trade war with the United States?
Well, sure, there are risks. I'm not sure what the alternative is for Canada. I don't think we're just going to stand by and take it from the Americans. I think there's a cross-partisan consensus in Canada among all political leaders that retaliatory tariffs are the right approach. The conservative leader has said as much himself. And so I think Mr. Carney has struck the right balance. Just today, we're seeing that the stock, markets across the world, the stock market is being adversely impacted by this trade war and by the sheer instability that Donald Trump has ushered in through this on and off again trade war. And so I think the Liberal Party and Mr. Carney have struck the right tone, but I think substantively they've responded correctly. And I think that we've actually been spared the worst in this trade war so far, and there's still a lot more diplomatic work to be done. And I think the fact that Mr. Carney already has initiated an early but I think strong relationship with Trump, and that I think Trump respects Mr. Carney's experience in global markets as a central bank governor of two G7 countries. We know that Donald Trump is completely unpredictable. We can't really negotiate with him, but I do think that the relationship between Carney and Trump is off to a good start. And that stands in contrast with the relationship between former Prime Minister Trudeau and Trump, which we know was extremely strained. And I think that did put the country at risk. But I think we need to move forward. And I think there is a consensus, not only among politicians, but among Canadians, that we need to retaliate, that we need to stand strong and stand up to the Trump administration.
Well, you talk about what's happening with the stock market, but something else that's happening today is Donald Trump announced he's going to hit China with 50% tariffs if they don't back off with their retaliatory tariffs. Is there a worry that Donald Trump is going to turn around and do the exact same thing to Canada?
I mean, sure. I mean, I can't predict what is going to happen. There are risks, but I think that Trump will has treated his relationship with Mexico and Canada, his northern and southern neighbors, in a different fashion than, say, China. And so that may be cold comfort, but at the end of the day, we are going to get through this as a country through maintaining strong relationship with the US administration, in spite of how hard that might be.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you. Take care.